Who doesn't love sharks? I mean, seriously, they're magnificent, ancient, and badass creatures. Our movies are full of them. We just seem obsessed with them. But what a lot of people don't realize about sharks is they're actually a key ally in our fight against the climate crisis. Now, how is this possible? Well, to understand that, we have to know that sharks have been around for a very long time. And when I mean a long time, I mean a long time. Sharks are one of the longest lasting animal groups to ever exist. And when something exists that long, it becomes an indispensable part of its environment. The first sharks appeared roughly 450 million years ago. To put that in perspective, that is way before dinosaurs first evolved, and that is even before trees evolved. And with over 500 living species and counting, we know these animals impact the planet in countless ways. However, for the purposes of discussing climate change, I want to focus on the big ones. Bull sharks, tiger sharks, hammerheads, great whites. The big scary jaws ones. Because these are the ones that we know are helping us fight the climate crisis. Now, how exactly are these big bitey fish helping us fight climate change? Well, the answer to that lies in a completely different group of organisms they regularly interact with called seagrasses. Now, seagrasses are fascinating organisms in their own right. They are the only known plant that has actually figured out a way to live consistently in the oceans. Seagrasses are a much younger group than sharks, only evolving about 100 million years ago. They are found hugging the coasts of every continent except Antarctica, where they form massive prairies, some of them so big that they can be seen from space. These underwater prairies are home to an incomprehensible number of marine animals. On top of that, they serve as a nursery for many young fish and invertebrate species who hide amongst the blades of grass during their young and vulnerable years. These seagrass beds are also vital food sources for dugongs, manatees, and sea turtles, where they graze upon them much like an antelope or a zebra would on the savanna. Seagrasses cover 0.1% of the entire surface of the ocean, yet they are responsible for 18% of its ability to capture carbon. Look at it this way. Every year, seagrasses are removing from the atmosphere enough carbon that equals roughly the emissions of 260 million cars. As seagrass die and then decompose, most of the carbon they captured ends up getting buried in the seafloor with them, imprisoning it right below the soil. This is what's called blue carbon. Carbon that was sucked out of the atmosphere and deposited in a marine environment. Other carbon sinks, like the rainforest, deposit carbon out of the atmosphere in a very similar manner. However, what makes seagrass unique is it does it way more efficiently than any other environment on Earth. In fact, seagrasses remove carbon from the atmosphere about 36 times faster than a tropical rainforest. On top of all that, seagrasses produce massive root networks, which spread out and stabilize the seafloor. This protects against erosion, and even can act like a buffer against storms, helping protect the coastlines from destruction. Sharks and seagrass have a very special relationship. Sharks function essentially as guardians of these underwater prairies, and in return, the underwater prairies raise and produce vast quantities of fish and other prey animals for the sharks to eat. Now, this is a relationship that took us forever to actually discover, and the reason for that is, sadly, sharks aren't quite what they used to be. People are understandably terrified of sharks, but the reality is they should be terrified for them. The scale of loss is almost incomprehensible. A study conducted in the northern Atlantic monitoring scalloped hammerhead populations and thresher shark populations found a 75% decline in these particular species alone in just a 3-year period. Another good example of this is bull shark and great white populations in the northern Atlantic. Both of those have gone down about roughly 90 to 98% over the past century. There are numerous reasons for these declines. However, the single biggest one is shark finning. It's a downright evil practice that involves dredging a shark up onto the deck of a boat, cutting off the top fin, and then throwing it overboard. All to get a bowl of soup. What makes shark finning especially awful is it does not instantly kill the shark. The shark is then left alone to die slowly and painfully. And what I find most upsetting about this is, sharks are not dumb creatures driven entirely by instinct. Evidence has shown these things are just as sentient and thinking as we are, meaning that that's suffering. that slow death that takes hours, that pain is just as real as if it were to happen to a human. Also, some rich asshole can get a bowl of soup. If you eat shark fin soup, you're going to hell. But for those of us who aren't eternally damned and not fans of shark murder, you got to understand this process happens roughly 11,000 times around the world per hour. All of a sudden, these massive declines are making a lot of sense. Since sharks have been so thoroughly depleted, their prey has been allowed to propagate out of control. In particular, rays and skates. Rays and skates oftentimes search the seafloor for all sorts of different invertebrates to eat. And they become a big threat to seagrass beds when they do this, because in order to search for their prey, they have to tear the seagrass beds apart. In a healthy ecosystem with lots of sharks, this would not be a problem. However, since we've depleted shark numbers so much, these animals are now out of control and are destroying entire seagrass beds no matter what protections we put on them, like fishing bans. Despite these protections, the rays and skates are still going crazy and destroying entire prairies. In 2011, in a place called Shark Bay in Western Australia, a heat wave hit the area, causing the water temperature to increase by 4 degrees Celsius. This killed 90% of the seagrasses in the bay. Yet, the entire beds were able to regenerate in as little as 2 years. And we can thank the tiger sharks for that. Dugongs, rays, skates, sea turtles. Normally, these animals would be huge threats to a recovering seagrass bed. But what's remarkable is, the areas the tiger sharks were prowling, those other animals avoided them like the plague, allowing the seagrasses to recover fully. The sharks became guardians of the recovering seagrass. If it weren't for them, it would have never regenerated, and the bay would have been functionally dead. Imagine if we put an end to the shark fin trade. Not only would we allow sharks to recover, but we'd allow them to do what they do best, and that is eat these out-of-control fish populations. Not only guarding what vital carbon sinks the ocean has left, but enabling new ones to be grown from what was lost. Sharks are a vital component of a healthy planet and are needed to combat climate change. So next time you see a shark, don't be afraid. Give it a big thank you. In fact, don't even stop there. Jump in the water and give it the biggest hug you can. It's gonna love it. So remember, hug your local shark.